Hello, welcome to Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla. I'll be your moderator. And our guest this time is, like all of our guests, are extremely intelligent and exciting, is Peter Maurer, our planning director for the county. Peter, welcome.
Thank you.
One of the things that everybody seems to be concerned about is planning issues right now. We have a general plan, we have a cannabis issue, and also we need to say a few words about county staff when policy changes take place in the county. But let's talk a little bit about you, a little bit of your background. You've been with us for how long now?
It's been almost 3 years.
3 years. It seems almost like yesterday.
It feels like yesterday. And it feels like a lifetime ago in some ways, too.
Over the 3 years, what are some of the things that you that you found particularly satisfying, and some things are more a challenge?
Well, I think I'm quite proud of the fact that we got a draft general plan done. It's been many years in the making. Many directors ahead of me that hadn't been able to quite accomplish the task. We're not quite there yet, but we have a draft done. 15 months worth of hearings before the Planning Commission. They went through almost line by line, modified the policies to suit the direction that they wanted it to go in, and I think we reached a good compromise. And so the next step in that process is the EIR, and we're in that process right now. I think just getting the department stabilized has been an accomplishment, and I've got a great staff to work with, and they do really good work.
I understand that you were with El Dorado before you came to Calaveras County?
Yes, I spent 28 years in El Dorado County.
28 years?
Yeah. Oh. It was going to be a temporary 2-year job, but things sort of led one thing led to another, and 28 years later, I was still there.
Well, El Dorado seems to be a well-planned community, so apparently you had a positive influence.
Well, there are a lot of challenges there, and it provided me with some insight as to what might happen in Foothill County. Similar situation. El Dorado's bigger population-wise and size, a little more growth pressure because of its proximity to Tahoe and Sacramento. But a lot of the same land use issues of the juxtaposition of urban development against rural lands, a lot of public open space. So it's many similar issues addressed there. One
of the concerns that some people have is the nexus of power in California seems to be in the high population counties, and then the rural counties don't really have that much to say about what goes on in Sacramento. But it's from Sacramento where the CEQA regulations come from. Now, in your observation, have you seen what has been the direction with CEQA as it would affect our county?
Well, there are a lot of changes that come about out of Sacramento that are trying to address all the issues of the state. And we have a very large and diverse state.
Right.
Obviously, Calaveras County is much different than Orange County, say, or some of the Bay Area counties. But the legislature is trying to look at the county as a whole. Don't necessarily agree with all of the rules that come out of Sacramento, but we've got to abide by them.
Right.
I think that as rural counties, we've got several organizations that try to lobby to recognize the needs of rural counties.
Right.
Granted, the population base is along the coast, and the rural central counties and northern counties sometimes get short shrift.
Yeah.
But RCRC and other organizations try to lobby for the needs of rural counties. An example is a bill that's in the legislature right now that mandates a representative from a rural county on the Transportation Commission, so that all the funding doesn't necessarily go to rural projects, but there's some money for rural counties as well. So
that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a great thing.
If someone wanted to have the CEQA have more flexibility so that the rural counties can better govern themselves, the best bet would be to encourage the supervisors to contact state representatives through RCRC.
Well, that would be one way to do that. I think that if you're a citizen, you contact your local representative, senator, contact them directly and let them know what your concerns are.
Okay.
You referred to CEQA, and CEQA often gets blamed for a lot of the woes of California, and there's some drawbacks to it, obviously, but ultimately it's an informational process.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily require county to take certain action. It just says, if you're going to take these actions, here's what you need to do. And so I think that sometimes CEQA gets a little bit of a bad rap, sometimes justifiably, but not always.
Yeah. Well, our taxpayer group is most concerned with property rights, and we'd like to have people have those rights respected by the county, providing they don't harm their neighbors or harm the public. And quite often, most of our prosperity seems to be hinged on those rights, where people can use their land in a productive manner and create an economy where people can actually have jobs. And so I think that's a good thing. Well, looking at the general plan process, we've just passed the point where there was a scoping session, and then we're going to be moving now in the EIR. What are we looking at time-wise, and what's going to happen?
Well, we just finished what's called the Notice of Preparation comment period. I think it ended today. Comments from different agencies and organizations and individuals that had concerns, and that's to address, to suggest items that should be addressed in the EIR.
Right.
And so the different state agencies particularly say, well, you need to look at this issue and that issue. So the consultants will now take that, as well as all the other issues that we already sort of know about,
Right.
and prepare the draft EIR. Excuse me. That will take a few months to do that. I am hoping that we'll have a draft EIR out late spring or early summer. I don't have the exact date, so they're going to depend a lot on what was in those comments, what other issues need to be addressed, how long it takes to do some of the analysis of traffic analysis and noise contouring, those kinds of things, to say, okay, what are the impacts, and then identifying what are potential mitigation measures. Can we add additional policies that would reduce an impact on say traffic or noise or rare endangered species or whatever, all the various items that we need to look at. Once that's done, then there is a 45-day public comment period on the draft, and we have to then respond to all of those comments in writing. So that can be lengthy, only depending on how many comments we've got, and we expect that we'll get fairly extensive comments on that. Once we've done that, then we can begin the public hearing process for adoption, Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. My hope is that by early fall, we can start Planning Commission hearings and have the general plan finally adopted by the board by the end of the calendar year.
Oh, wow. What an accomplishment. 8 years we've been doing this?
Well, I hope, because there's no guarantee at this point. And a lot of it, a lot of it's political, and a lot of it depends on the extent of comments we get.
No, I understand that you do not set policy. You need to follow board policy.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, you're total sunshine. You have no agendas that are not open, and so everybody knows exactly what you're doing. And also, you're kind of a source of advice as to the law. I guess you're the main interpreter of CEQA for our county as to what we can do and what we can't do. And along those lines, what are some of the things that are of major concern that you have so far that have gone into in the scoping study that the study is going to address?
Well, I don't think there are any surprises there. I think that the issues associated with general planning is, you say, property rights versus public interest,
right.
Protection of environmental quality or other quality of life issues. I see my role as advisor as well as sort of process expert to the board. Here's what we need to do to get through the process properly in order to meet the requirements of the law. But at the same time, I try to provide my advice to the Planning Commission and the board as to here's what I think is the best idea, what meets the board's policy directives as to how do we get there through the general plan process. I have my own biases, obviously, but I try not to let those get in the way of the policy direction that I've been given. And so when the Planning Commission adopted the set of vision statements that were very strongly towards property rights, then I said, okay, those are my marching orders to proceed with development of a plan that focuses on property rights, but at the same time meets the requirements of well, not of CEQA, but of general plan law, all the other requirements that we need to meet in California.
In other words, you're a human being.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yes.
One of the things, let's. So in the general plan, we're looking maybe by the end of the year.
I'm hopeful
we might have in place.
The biggest challenge, of course, is that new state laws always come along, and in 2018, new provisions of general plan law take effect. And so if we don't meet that deadline, then we've got to sort of go back, add some additional provisions and sort of endless cycle of loops that go back. Then we need to revise the EIR to address those concerns. It just seems to sort of go on forever.
Yeah.
So if we can meet that deadline, and that's what I'm pushing for, then we at least will have an adopted plan, and we can move forward. And then the next time we need to update it, we can add those other provisions.
Now I understand that the state has interest in global warming, and I think they call it climate change. Mm-hmm. Now, is that going to be in our general plan as well?
There are provisions in the general plan regarding climate change. It's a mandated requirement. There's also CEQA will address those issues as well. It's part of CEQA. So we'll be looking at it. We'll be making policy decisions based on the information that we have. Here's what this plan may or may not do towards climate change, and the board can then say, well, we can see how this might be beneficial to the county. On the other hand, that's possible, but we don't think it's really in the benefit to the county. We can make what's called findings of overriding consideration. We don't have to adopt every mitigation measure that's identified. As long as you can have a rational basis for why you don't think that's appropriate for this county, then we can say, we're rejecting that proposal, and here's our reasons why, even though it might lead to a perceived or real environmental impact.
Would, if one of those considerations were the scientific facts that the global warming theory was not accurate, could that be considered?
Well, I don't know that we would necessarily want to get into that argument.
Okay.
The state says you have to address these things, so we'll address them.
All right.
And
you can't question the scientific basis of the global warming theory.
I don't think that's necessarily the role of the general plan.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll have to see how that works out. One of the things that is important is the effect of the general plan on our economy. It seems like if people can be able to use their property pretty much without excessive regulation from government, we could have prosperity and we could have jobs, and it would be a good thing. And if it gets overly impressive, then they have to find jobs somewhere else. They couldn't find work here, and our productivity goes down. One of the major items, which is a hot button topic, is cannabis now.
Oh, yeah.
And now our Taxpayer Association, our board is split on that. There's some are for banning cannabis. Other ones are more libertarian. Let people do what they want. So they don't hurt their neighbors. And so what the board does agree with is that we will do our best to provide balanced information to the public, which means we'll get the arguments for and the arguments against, and then we'll share those arguments with the others, and then these are like ballot arguments, and then we'll put it all together, and if we can get funding, we'll send this to the voters, and then the voters will have a truly objective picture of it as best we can do. It has none of my opinion involved with it, only to try to make sure that it's sunshine and done properly and fairly. However, some of the things I've thought about that has nothing to do with the Taxpayer Association is a concern that it seems like above all else, do no harm. And sometimes government doesn't follow that. Sometimes government actually does harm. And so we try to find ways to avoid that. Now, in the cannabis issue, I wonder if banning cannabis in areas where it hurts the neighbors would be a good thing, and then those areas where it doesn't make any difference, may not be such a good thing because it may not be fair to the cannabis growers. In other words, it almost seems like it might be a land use question rather than a police question.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, clearly it's a land use issue as far as where it's appropriate, just like any other land use.
Right.
You put industrial uses in certain areas, residential uses other. Sometimes you can mix them where they're appropriate. I think it was a early Supreme Court decision where the statement was a pig in a parlor is different than a pig in a barnyard.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the basis of zoning.
Right.
And so. Depending on the results of the election in May or in the board's future guidance on this, if we proceed with a regulatory program,
right.
then those are the issues we'll need to look at.
Right.
What size parcel is appropriate? What
Right.
type of zoning? How much of a setback? How can you allow this to occur in certain areas without adversely affecting your neighbor?
Yes.
And that's the same thing we look at it with an asphalt plant or a gas station or any other land use.
Well, shouldn't, and if that were true, doesn't it make sense that the cannabis would be a designated use that's unique, different than other uses?
Well, that's the way we've addressed it now, and that's the way I think that if we proceed with regulation, that's the way we would look at it. Is it's a unique use. We've identified it as being different than other agricultural
Right.
uses.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting regulatory dilemma in that we have conflicting state and federal laws.
Right.
And until that's resolved, I think some of the controversy over whether to ban it, whether to regulate it, is always going to be there.
Right.
And I don't want to get into which way is right at this
Yeah.
point in time. At this, previously the board said we were going to regulate it, so we're working on regulations. We have an EIR that's in process to look at the potential impacts of that. The new board says we don't think that was the right course of action. We want to ban it. So now we're working on a proposal to ban. They've also said that if the voters reject Measure C, then or Measure B, then they'll sort of revisit that issue, and maybe we'll end up with regulations
Modified,
in place.
yeah.
At this point in time, there's too many unknowns to really know the final direction. Other than right now, the board has said prepare a ban ordinance, and that's what we're working on right now.
I see. And also at the same time, they've approved an extension of the urgency ordinance for a year. Is that correct?
Well, it's until
Up to a year.
It's up to a year, but it's in the operations of an urgency ordinance is it's in effect until there's a replacement ordinance that's permanent in nature.
Which could be a ban.
Which could be a ban. It could be regulation.
Okay.
And we have under the operations of law one more year to get that done.
Right.
Obviously, the board and they admonished us very clearly. We don't want to wait a year. We want this done right away, as quickly as possible, and that's our marching orders.
All right. So ignoring the ballot issue, how long do you think it would take to prepare the ordinance for a ban?
Well, it'll be fairly short to prepare a ban ordinance. There's a number of models out there that other counties and cities have adopted that are successful. We can just take that, modify it slightly to fit our needs. The bigger question is, what's the environmental effect of it?
Right.
And under CEQA, there's 3 different options you can take. You can do an exemption if one fits. I'm not sure of one that would fit a ban ordinance at this point in time, but it's possible. We're looking into that right now. We could do a negative declaration or mitigated negative declaration that would say basically, we've analyzed it. There are no environmental impacts associated with a ban ordinance. And we move forward. That has a little bit longer time frame. There's public notice periods that would add another month and a half to the process. Or we could continue utilizing the EIR, which is the safest way to go, but the longest route. It would probably take us till June or July to get something in place.
I see. We're looking at June and July, perhaps, ignoring the May 2nd vote, to have an ordinance in place, which could be a ban or a partial ban or a form of regulation.
Well, we don't know that it's going to be, and that's something we're still discussing, is, how quickly can we get this done, knowing that the board wants it done as quickly as possible. So that's something we're looking into and trying to decide what's the best course of action for the county. Regardless of the time frame, the urgency ordinance will continue to be in effect until either the initiative is approved by the voters or the board adopts some other replacement ordinance for that. It could be in April, it could be in June or July.
Okay, so we're continuing to process the applications?
Yes.
And what's the status of that now, roughly?
Well, we've finished reviewing about, I'm going to say maybe 180 or so, they've either approved or denied. We still have several hundred more to go, but they're all in some, it's not like we haven't even looked at them. Many of them are just simply waiting on one or two last items before we can take final action. So I'm hopeful that we can get through all of those before the next season begins in earnest. I know that some of the growers are probably already starting their plants now. They've got clones from last seasons and they're in greenhouses or wherever. But we're hoping that we can finish reviewing all those, make the site inspections, finish the background checks, and give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to those that we've been able to review.
Would the EIR consider economic considerations?
Not typically. An EIR does not look at economic. We can, and I think it's something that's important for the county to consider on any type of project, whether it's a cannabis ordinance, a general plan, or even a large development project. What's the economic effect of this on the county, both from an infrastructure and public service provision, as well as revenue coming in, taxes, as well as the local economy.
Have you seen a recent study on the effect of cannabis in the county?
I received a copy of it. I haven't had a chance to review it. So
I looked it over. I'm kind of amazed that it's like 17% of our county is it's pretty substantial.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see, sort of a peer review of that, to see how that stacks up with, other. But I think there is a fairly significant impact on the county as far as the revenue coming in, not just from the tax measure that we might receive money from Measure C that passed last year, but also just the benefits to businesses in the county. Construction, plumbing supplies, you name it, the people that are contributing to the community.
We know gardening tools. Is it too late to include economic considerations in the EIR?
Well, it doesn't really need to be in the EIR, because the EIR is an environmental analysis.
Right.
But the county can certainly consider the economic effect of any action it takes.
Okay.
So, and that would be something that I would think the board would want to do.
Right.
As a part of our review of any proposal.
Okay. One of the things that's pretty important is recognizing that our county employees, the tremendous amount of work they're doing, and also being able to perform when there's differing directions coming from the Board of Supervisors. Sometimes philosophies change when you have changes of supervisors, and yet the planning department keeps on plugging away and offering sunshine and helpful advice. So you're doing a great job.
Thank you. I give a shout out to my staff. I've got a really excellent staff right now. We've been able to hire some extra help to get us through this crunch. I could use a lot more, but we do make do with what we can. I've got a very helpful staff. I think that I'd like to think that everyone that comes to our counter walks away at least with the answers that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Maybe not the actual answers, but they've got an answer to their question.
Yeah, they may or may not agree.
Yes.
One of the things, of course, is budget. It looks like you're one of the departments that doesn't have some of the violent changes in budget considerations that some of the other departments are going through.
We've been able to make do over the last 3 years I've been here with a very small percentage of the budget for the county. We take in some revenue from application fees, but primarily we're a general fund funded department, and each year I've been able to live within my means and hope to continue to do so.
I'm looking at the development in our county, you probably have better than anybody else an overall picture of what's happening. If you were to make a chart as to the amount of projects that are presently going on now, compare it over the last several years, maybe 3 years or 5 years, how does that graph look? Are we getting more business, more people applying, or less, or what's
I think
really happening?
it's been pretty stable. I mean, when the economic downturn hit in 2008, things just came to a screeching halt.
Right.
And we haven't seen a lot of activity since then. I've seen a slight uptick in projects since I've been here in the last 3 years, but very slight. It hasn't been significant. A lot of inquiry about projects, old projects that have been sort of on hold for a while, or have been, maybe they were approved hand of map, but they haven't moved forward, are looking at, well, maybe it's time to record some new lots. There's a couple of projects in various parts of the county that are sort of look like they might be moving forward. But there's just not a lot going on right now. So I would say it's been pretty stable, maybe a very slight increase.
Do you think that there's anything that the county can do to encourage more development?
Well,
without
I think that
being too controversial.
Yeah, the development activity is really more of a product of the national economy and the world economy.
Right.
When housing was booming, the county was booming. When housing crashed, the county stopped. There are certain things that we can do as policymakers and processors that sort of help the process along. And I'll jokingly say that the best thing we can do is get out of the way. But there's certain ways we have to. I mean, you can't just roll over and say, sure, fine, go ahead. We'll get stopped through litigation or other means. And not every project is necessarily a good project. So
right.
Our job is to make sure that the projects that come in, are appropriate for where they're proposed. They meet our county standards, and we can process them through in as timely a manner as we can, knowing that it takes time to go through the process. So our best approach to helping development is to work with them, make sure that they meet our requirements, what the county has established as far as the rules and regulations, and then assist them through the process.
Is there a source of information that can help counties streamline their planning process a little bit to make it more freedom friendly? I'm not sure if I did some Google searches and I couldn't find anything.
I'm not aware of any source. Where to here's a list of things
for a
you can
manual.
do. Yeah. I think we're always looking for ways that we can improve service.
Right.
And the biggest challenge is when you're neck deep in alligators, it's hard to remember that you came in to drain the swamp.
Drain the swamp, and that's a good point to close on. Thank you for being our guest.
All right, you're welcome.
And appreciate you coming. Thank you for watching Taxpayer Alert.